Fiore, and welcome to our video editorial series. This is where I'll go off on some topic related to the video game industry in some way, be it business, design, or trends that I see happening, or whatever is just ruminating in my brain at the late hours of the night that I just have to get out. Recently, that thing has been Nintendo. See, Nintendo is a company I'm a big fan of, and I have been for a very long time. They are the root of some of my earliest gaming memories, and some of my best gaming memories. The N64 and Game Boy Color are my first consoles, and many of my favorite games ever are Nintendo games. Without them, I wouldn't have gotten into the gaming hobby, and I wouldn't be making this video. However, after a recent podcast discussion, I was thinking about Nintendo and their place in the industry in 2025. The price of the Switch 2 and how they're approaching that. And while I think they have done many great things and continue to do a lot of great things, I also know there's a lot of negative things attached to them, in the past, present, and probably the future. Which brought me to this topic. Is Nintendo good or bad for the video game industry? I'm going to examine that in this video today, starting with the bad.
Oh, mamma mia!
It's no secret that Nintendo is protective of its IP, and that's fine to an extent. Legally, as a copyright holder, you do need to protect your copyright to continue holding on to the rights, along with wanting to crack down on piracy of games you're currently selling. I understand that. However, Nintendo often takes this to the next level, indebting the lawsuits they win for literal millions of dollars, or going after targets that really aren't a threat to them or their brand. Recent cases include February 2024 filed a lawsuit against the creators of Yuzu, the Switch emulator, leading to a $2.4 million settlement and cessation of the emulator's development. In October 2020, they targeted Gary Bowser for selling devices that enabled Switch piracy. He was extradited to the US and later sentenced to 40 months in prison, and then a $14.5 million in damages, including $10 million from a civil suit. He will now owe a portion of his income for life to Nintendo. In Costa Rica, a small supermarket named Super Mario faced legal action from Nintendo, which argued that the store's name infringed on its globally recognized trademark, even though the supermarket was established 12 years before Super Mario existed. In 2018, Nintendo filed a lawsuit against an Arizona couple for operating LoveRoms.com and LoveRetro.com, websites that offered unauthorized copies of old Nintendo games at the time that were no longer in print. And the most petty one of all, in 2024, Nintendo and the Pokemon Company filed a patent infringement lawsuit against Tokyo-based developer Pocket Pair Inc., alleging their game Power World infringed on Pokemon-related patents. And these are just some of the cases. This is even all of them over the past 10 years. Just the biggest ones. And I understand protecting your IP. I do. That is your moneymaker, especially in Nintendo's case. But really, a Costa Rican grocery store? Oh, and I almost forgot. Ongoing lawsuits against creators using emulators or mods of Nintendo games, including fan-made content, including cease and desist orders. Which brings me to my next negative thing attached to Nintendo and how it sets a bad precedent for the industry. Anyone who follows gaming YouTube or the games press tends to know Nintendo doesn't really like content creators. They kind of just begrudgingly work with them, and really only the ones they deem worthy of interaction. You can easily get put on Nintendo's blacklist if your games press for doing anything they don't like. They will copyright claim anything that contains their IP, even if it's a transformative work. They will issue cease and desist orders for fan games or fan projects, even if they aren't being sold at all or making any money. And they will cancel events without their permission if that's being done in a way they don't like. Specifically, the Smash community is the one who has been punished the most by this. In 2020, a major Smash tournament known as the Big House was canceled for finding a way to add online play to Melee, where Nintendo issued a cease and desist order. In 2022, the Smash World Championships were canceled because Nintendo just didn't want to grant a license for the tournament series anymore, despite ongoing discussion. In 2022 as well, they pulled Smash Brothers from Evo because Sony purchased Evo. These are just a couple of examples, along with the ones I mentioned earlier about fan games and the fan community. It's very clear that Nintendo's community loves Nintendo to death, including myself. But Nintendo clearly only loves its community when it plays by a very specific set of harsh rules and very unfair rules, in my opinion. And it sets a very bad precedent as an industry leader, and it makes it so other publishers can be okay doing these things as well. Speaking of Nintendo allowing publishers to run rampant, look, I think anyone who owns a Switch at this point knows the eShop is trash. It is filled with piles and piles of shovelware, porn games, and random bullshit games that should never make it onto the platform. It is truly ironic that the company that invented a seal of quality to combat shovelware to help America come back from the video game crash of the 80s, and had a publishing limit on how many games a studio could publish in a year, now has a shovelware problem. The thing is, this is not an eShop exclusive issue. There's also a problem on Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation. It's just far worse on Nintendo because the eShop is a mess to navigate. Good luck finding something if you don't know its exact name, and if it's not on the featured page and you don't know its exact name, it might as well not exist. It does not help. The shop itself is super slow, and so even if you know what you want, enjoy the agonizingly long process of getting there. Hell, at this point, it's better to just use Nintendo's website to buy the game and then download it off your download list. Now, some of these discovery issues are supposed to be fixed by the Switch 2 store, but until I see it in action, I'm not gonna believe it. Speaking of things I still have trouble believing are a thing in the year 2025, and a problem Nintendo has consistently had for over 20 years, when it comes to the internet, Nintendo has had this, weird relationship. They want all the benefits of the internet. Online play, advertising their games, viral games. We can all agree that I don't think Breath of the Wild would be nearly as big of a success without it going viral from all the crazy stuff you can do. But they don't want the weird, kinda shitty parts of the internet, like being able to voice chat with people, or getting weird friend requests. We're 20 years in, and they still run on friend codes to add friends. Some of their games still have connectivity issues, like Smash Brothers netcode is bad. There's no other way to say it. Smash Brothers netcode is bad, and they needed to not do that. They're finally adding voice chat without a phone app or some weird third-party thing, but it feels 20 years too late. Yeah, good job with cross-game chat and voice chat. A feature the Xbox 360 had at launch 20 years ago. They're adding Discord-style game streaming to friends, except if that Switch 2 preview footage was anything to go by, it runs at 10 frames per second, and who is ever going to watch that? I don't care who you are, I don't want to watch Mario Kart or Zelda played at 10 frames per second. I'm sorry. And this was kind of acceptable when it was free, but now they charge money for it. And I get that it's, a third or lower their nearest competitors, but it still kind of sucks to part of the way you pay for in Switch Online is a working online service, and it's just now only getting voice chat, and some of the games are still kind of unstable. Now, with all that said, there are some minor things I could talk about with Nintendo that bother me. But those were by far the biggest, and I think those are the most negative things you can say about them largely. And then in some cases how they set a bad precedent for other large publishers and platform holders, as the current industry leader. They've sold more units than anyone else. But what about the positive? Does Nintendo do enough good to outweigh the bad? Well, let's get into that with our first good thing to say about Nintendo.
It's perfect! Wahoo!
that you can say about Nintendo in the past, in the present, and most likely in the future is they really do genuinely care about putting out quality video games. Nintendo is consistently one of the most highest reviewed publishers in the entire industry. Looking at Metacritic of the top 100 games of all time, not including remakes, Nintendo has 12 of them, with 5 of them being in the top 10. Then if you filter to just games released during the Switch era, they have 13 games in the top 100, with 4 being in the top 10. The only other publisher that comes even close in this regard is Sony, with 8 games in the top 100. Also, of those 13 games in the top 100 of the current era, they all reviewed well with fans. Then, you have to factor in their business practices when it comes to their actual games. Outside of Pokemon games, which aren't developed by Nintendo at all, you rarely ever hear about a Nintendo game coming out with game-breaking bugs, a lack of content, or having predatory microtransactions that are all over the industry now. This is a plague in the AAA space that Nintendo hasn't really touched. While other publishers are trying to cut corners and nickel and dime you as much as possible with a special edition that's only cosmetics, or putting predatory microtransactions in single-player games, Nintendo is doing the opposite. Just making great games. I wish more companies would do this and have this focus. I wish more companies would also focus on fresh and new ideas, which brings me to my next point.
I'm gonna win.
Nintendo is a company that will always strive for new ideas. I think most people are aware they abandoned the graphics race in 2005 when they started really ramping up production on the Wii. And most people say that's when they started to focus on new experiences. But I would disagree. I would say Nintendo always has, and probably always will, be innovating. When it comes to hardware, Nintendo is credited with creating the D-pad, the analog stick, shoulder buttons, the first portable game console that gained mainstream success, the light gun, motion controls for a home console, a wireless controller that actually worked well and didn't suck down batteries, rumble support, high fidelity rumble, and the first ever hybrid portable home console. But it isn't just hardware, it's software as well. Donkey Kong is considered the first ever platformer. Zelda is the first game to ever use a battery-based cartridge for saving, so you can continue where you're left off. The Metroidvania genre gets a lot of its design and name from Metroid, lock-on targeting with Ocarina of Time, a dynamic 3D camera in Mario 64. The first game to ever use a real-world time and calendar at the same time was Animal Crossing. First mainstream fitness game was Wii Fit. Popularized touch controls with the DS that many smartphone games use now. For a long time, Nintendo's goal has always been to surprise and delight players through innovation. And I think all of these are perfect examples of how they've done that and how they keep doing that. I think the recent Zelda games are an example of that. I think that Mario Odyssey was an example of them doing that. And I'm willing to bet they have another big surprise like this that's going to come with the Switch 2 soon here. They are always focused on innovation and fun more than anything else, in the past and in the present. Speaking of Nintendo's past and them doing things that I wish more publishers would do, it's no secret Nintendo has been a driving force in the game industry since the 1980s. In the year 2025, they really do embrace that. While most other publishers are either ignoring their history entirely or selling it back to you for $50 for 10 games at a time, Nintendo is not. They're giving you affordable and legal access to their classic games. $50 a year, you can play most of Nintendo's first-party lineup on the NES, SNES, and N64. You also still have some access to Game Boy and Game Boy Advance, though admittedly not as large. Then with the Switch 2, GameCube games are right around the corner, and they're launching with 4 heavy hitters. Now, if you've been a Nintendo fan since 1985, this means you can play almost every mainline Mario game on a Switch. You can play almost every mainline Zelda game on a Switch. you can see how their franchises and their development style has evolved over time. And all that innovation I mentioned earlier, you can see it over time all on the Switch. It's kind of amazing. And on top of that, they recently opened a museum in Kyoto celebrating their history. They have theme parks opening up. Nintendo is really focused on their past as well as their future. And that's fantastic when you have Sony just paying lip service to it with Astro Bot, but barely giving you anything on PlayStation Plus in regards to classics, and Microsoft canceling its backwards compatibility program. Nintendo is doing a lot of stuff to embrace their past while looking to the future. And in an industry that so often disregards its past, that's super important. However, looking to the future,
Show me your moves.
one thing I think gaming enthusiasts and hardcore gamers don't tend to think about is growing the hobby or even appealing to anyone else besides themselves. The thing is, though, is to have more future turbo nerd enthusiasts like themselves and like people who watch these kind of videos, you need to appeal to a younger demographic and get them into the hobby. Nintendo does this. They don't just make quality games like I mentioned earlier. They make games that a younger demographic can enjoy as well as an older demographic. And they do this so people who play those games as kids show them to their own children as adults. It's like how baseball has become a pastime. Mario Kart and Zelda and Smash have all become pastimes in certain households. And then you have their outreach to the casual audience. Since the DS and Wii, Nintendo has really leaned into a blue ocean strategy of not just chasing sweaty turbo nerds like myself, but going after anyone. Hell, my mother bought a DS. She played my Wii. She loved Wii Sports. She loved Brain Age. She loved Everybody Golf. You know? And now, because of that, it got her deeper into games, and she messes around on Apple Arcade. She used to play my Xbox 360 somewhat often. The last thing you want is your hobby to boil down to just a bunch of old enthusiasts talking about the good old days and keeping it how it was. Nintendo is preventing that by making it so their games appeal to a younger demographic, appeal to adults as well, and try and getting them out to as many people as possible and making them playable by as many people as possible. And that's awesome. They don't just focus on the 18 to 35-year-old male. They focus on everyone. And that is why they keep growing, and that is why games like Animal Crossing and Mario Kart and Smash and Zelda continue to blow up. And that's why that's a big part of why the hobby has grown so much from 1985 to now. Nintendo is a huge part of that because of exactly what I just mentioned. Which, with all that said, let's go over a few minor things and get to the conclusion of the video. Now, there is plenty of other stuff I could have gone over. The fact that Nintendo is traditionally very good to its employees. Developers love working there. They have an almost zero turnover rate, and people stay at the job for a long time, saying that the pay is good, the vacation is good, and the benefits are good. On the bad side of things, I could have talked about their weird new variable pricing structure. But I kind of wanted to just go over what I saw as the most important things. As for my conclusion here, I think Nintendo is genuinely very good for the video game industry. I feel like most of the bad Nintendo does for the industry is just kind of one thing. They're overly litigious. They go way above and beyond when it comes to protecting their copyright. When it comes to dealing with content creators, when it comes to dealing with events, especially as a member of the FGC, the Smash stuff sucks real bad. But I think that is massively outweighed by the good they do for the AAA space. They still try and innovate with their game design of their games, even if sometimes it doesn't always work out. They try and appeal to the broadest audience possible, getting new gamers into the hobby, people like my mom, people like young kids. And I think that's very important for growing the hobby, and having an ambassador for the hobby is fantastic. I think they do a good job of keeping classic games open to as many people as possible, and they keep adding more almost every month. And the last thing is they don't nickel and dime you. Nintendo puts out fantastic games at a set price that are polished, are finished, have plenty of content, and don't have bullshit deluxe editions that lock you out of content or cosmetics, don't have predatory microtransactions that try and nickel and dime you along the way. You pay $60 to $80 for a game, you get a finished, fun, complete video game. And that's awesome, and it's something I want to see more studios emulate. Just like the way they handle plastics, like they handle appealing genuinely to a broad audience. They're a great ambassador for the industry, they're great for video games, and I hope after this video you feel the same way. Anyway, see you in the next one, everybody.